Hello. So the myth has long been that in order to stay young and beautiful looking, we need special wrinkle creams. According to Dr. John Lakey, the world-renowned Beverly Hills beauty expert, most of those wrinkle fixes on the market are nothing more than glorified moisturizers. So recently, Dr. Lakey has focused his attention away from mainstream cosmetic practice to pursue a revolutionary anti-aging technology breakthrough, one that some experts say could empty the wallets of the cosmetics industry. His personal clients have dubbed his new do-it-yourself technique the age rewinder method, because it can take years or even decades off your appearance in under 2 minutes. I could do with some of this stuff. Dr. Lakey has released a step-by-step video to the public, free and uninterrupted, where he outlines exactly how to use this simple solution from home. The video's racked up over 2.3 million views and counting. So far, thousands of women, what about the men, are reporting they look decades younger. So you can find out more about this yourself right now. Go to bhmd1.com/Ross or click on the link in the description box below. That's bhmd1.com/Ross. Now, there is one thing that Dr. Lakey asks from his viewers. If watching this video helps you look and feel younger than you have in years, then please share this video with your friends and loved ones. Together, we have the power to make as many women reclaim a youthful look as possible. Go watch the video at bhmd1.com/Ross right now, or just click on the link in the description box below. G'day and welcome to the Reality Check Q&A, again with Alexandra Bush. G'day, Alex. Let's fire away and try and wade our way through the morass of questions we've got coming in.
Awesome. Our first question is about UFO whistleblower David Grusch. We recently found out he's been hired to be a senior advisor to a representative from Missouri. A person here on Twitter asked, how much will David be able to actually advise this lawmaker? And what can he really express and share with them?
Well, I can say I've spoken to David a few times about this appointment to Representative Eric Burlison's office, and I think it's a great move, and so does David. It's an opportunity for David to be on the inside the Congress, pushing not just his own representative, but also directing questions and instructing people in other areas. One of the big problems, frankly, is we all think that congressmen are probably just sitting around waiting for the next UAP information. They are pretty busy. And so I think somebody like David, who has the expertise that he's bringing to the job, is really important. There is a question mark about how much he can share because of the, interestingly enough, not so much the security classifications for David, because whilst he's still obviously waiting, I think, for the renewal of his security clearance, as I understand it, the issue is more, are the members of the Oversight Committee, of which Eric Burlison is one, cleared to hear all that David would be cleared to provide? And that's a big issue. I mean, the way that this has been kept secret in the Congress is there are individuals in the Congress, notably members of the Gang of Eight, who are supposedly allowed to be briefed into all secrets, including WUSAPs, waived, unacknowledged special access programs, the biggest secrets of all. And I know for a fact they haven't been. So there's been a clear breach of oversight here. The personal view I have on this is it's great that David's on the inside, and it's great that we have representatives like Eric Burlison, who's basically asking questions about the UAP issue. And there are individual members of the UAP caucus who are fired up on this issue. But I really do take the view that this needs to be coming from the White House. This needs to be leadership from the White House. A lot of people, particularly on the Republican side, are waiting to see what the president's going to say on the UAP issue, because conspicuously, President Trump has signed executive orders authorizing or mandating the declassification of JFK, RFK, MLK, Epstein files, but we're still waiting to see any executive order on the UAPs. And I guess the ball is in the president's court on that area. And I suspect a lot of the Congress people who are basically interested in chasing this issue are waiting to see what leadership comes from the White House.
All right, we have a question from Louise on Twitter. She asks, Ross, would you consider doing an Easter special on the Shroud of Turin on Reality Check?
Louise is an Australian friend of mine and a very good one. And she's also a believer in the Catholic Church and everything it does, and in particularly the Shroud of Turin. And we've had long, interesting debates about this. And suffice to say, I'm a bit of a Shroud of Turin skeptic. But look, I guess like a lot of these issues, if there's new evidence, I mean, I am struck by the fact that there was some recent testing done on the shroud, and it did date back 2,000 years, 2 millennia. I haven't actually directed my mind to it in the kind of detail where I would feel comfortable looking at it. I do know that the Vatican has a miracles department that investigates miracles, and I don't think I've even told Louise this, that when I was working in television in Australia, I was involved in reporting on the investigation by the Vatican of a real miracle. And it was fascinating to see the degree of scientific rigor that the Vatican brought to their analysis of whether or not what happened to an Australian woman who's still alive and who was cured from her cancer was indeed a miracle. And I just don't know what to know about this. It's enough to be involved in investigating the UAPs issue. The idea of religious miracles is something that I've never really applied my mind to. If somebody can help me with evidence, I'm happy to go there.
Edward from YouTube asks, Ross, now that UFOs are becoming more acceptable as a topic, do you think it's time to revisit historical UFO stories that were dismissed as nonsense in their day?
Oh, okay. That's a good question. You know, I've always been interested in the 1896, 1897 UFO waves over the United States, which started in California and slowly there were sightings across the Midwest and eventually even on the East Coast. When I was researching my book In Plain Sight, I was researching American newspaper archives from the 19th century, and I was struck by the fact that there was this plethora of sightings of supposed airships. And when you actually go in and look at the articles that described what people were seeing, it included lights, and it included descriptions that are not that far away from the current UAP flap, the supposed drone flap that's been occurring across the United States in the last few months. The one that the Pentagon and the FAA are all claiming are authorized research drones, and which certain skeptics assert with absolute confidence, the braggarts as they are simply home hobby drones, and that we're all confusing them in a moment of mass hysteria. I must say, I do think there are interesting historical parallels between those kind of sightings. There's the, I think, Aurora, Texas UFO story. And all of these, of course, have been dismissed as hoaxes. But when you actually do what I did, which is to go back and have a look through the newspaper archives of the era, what really struck me was the number of independent articles. These weren't just syndicated articles being sent across the United States. These were individual reporters in individual towns right across the western part of the United States, and then a little bit less as it crept across the east. Something was moving across from west to east, and it was described as airships, 1896, 1897. And it was the fact to me that the hoaxers have claimed that this was just journos in San Francisco making up BS stories. and then putting them out on the wires for a bit of fun, and that they got picked up in a kind of a mass hysteria at the time. It doesn't wash with me, because when you actually look at the way these stories were reported, these were individual reporters in individual towns in very remote parts of America, basically reporting the same thing: craft being flown by humanoids who actually on occasion spoke to these people, who actually acknowledged that these were some kind of advanced new craft. And remember, this is before known propelled mechanized flying machines. So it was a very, very weird period in American history, and there was never any explanation for it. My only issue with that story is, how do you investigate it? Unless somebody comes forward with new evidence, all we're really doing is raking over the old stories from the past. And I guess I, for one, am getting a bit bored with those. That's why I'm more excited about what people like Skywatcher are doing, and more excited by the possibility of us being able to attract the phenomenon and perhaps record it scientifically using cameras and other sensor equipment so that we can verify or disprove whatever it is.
Well, speaking of old stories, someone on YouTube wants to know whatever happened to that Las Vegas UFO backyard incident. Seems like it just vanished like many stories before it.
Okay, look, I have a perpetual argument with my good friend and buddy Scott Roeder from Evidence Room. He's a forensic investigator who really got into this case and spent a lot of time investigating it. I strongly commend everybody go to his site, Evidence Room, Scott Roeder, R-O-D-E-R. Scott is very much a believer in the Las Vegas case, and he did come on NewsNation. We did actually do a special with Scott where he was interviewed about his reasons why he felt the whole story was legitimate. He'd interviewed members of the family who were sticking by their story that in their Las Vegas backyard there was a landing of some kind of a craft, and in fact there were certain types of creatures, entities that were seen and in fact videoed in the backyard by members of the family. I never really felt there was enough evidence, and I always felt it was strange the way the family were, at least initially, quite evasive about speaking publicly. I'm told by Scott that they have more recently been interested in speaking and engaging, and that they're not resiling from what they say they saw. But look, NewsNation, again, we broke the story and kept leading it out there, and we did the special. There's not much more we can do unless new information comes forward.
David from Twitter asked, has Ross considered digging into past abductee stories to obtain better insight into UAP, like Kelly Cahill's or other prominent cases?
Wow, I'm glad somebody's picked up in the US on the Kelly Cahill case, because that's one of my favorites. The Kelly Cahill case is a case involving a woman in suburban Melbourne. She's driving her car back from some social event in a fairly remote, slightly rural part of suburban Melbourne late one night. And she pulls over because she sees lights in a field. And there's this whole missing time phenomenon. What she describes is being taken on board a craft. Again, it's kind of recovered memories. And she's very convincing in the interviews that I've seen. There are a lot of interviews with her on film from, I think, 30 or 40 years ago. I actually tried to find Kelly and tried to get her to participate in an interview with me for my book, In Plain Sight, when I was doing my research a few years ago, because I'd heard that there was independent corroboration of Kelly's abduction, that there was a second family that were in another car that saw her walking off into the field and then being taken off by some kind of giant flying saucer. And it's a story that I've been told by multiple people, that there are these secondary witnesses. And that's what I always look for. I'm not really interested in raking over the coals of old stories unless we can find new evidence that helps us take it further. And because this case is now, 40 years old, it would be great to be able to retell it, but with new information. So if anybody out there knows what I'm talking about, the second family in the car that night that saw Kelly being taken, I'd be very, very interested in talking to them. Depressingly, there is, ironically, I'm told, a UFO body in Australia that did the interview with this family. And for some reason, it's never released the findings of that interview. One of the problems in the UFO UAP research world is kind of jealous enmities mean that people hold on to information and never release it. And I think in the interests of transparency, it's important to get this stuff out there so that it can be assessed and verified or disproved.
We have a viewer from Twitter asking who and why would Ross subpoena for a task force if he had the power?
Oh boy. Certainly the principals of Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, Raytheon, Battelle, and Boeing. I have no doubt at all that those companies are in possession or have knowledge of legacy UAP programs. There are certain individuals within what used to be called the Office of Global Access in the CIA, whose names I know, but I'm not really willing to disclose them here because I'm not sure that they're not active intelligence operatives with the CIA, and revealing their names might compromise ongoing intelligence operations. But yes, there are certain key individuals I would like to see subpoenaed. And look, frankly, people like David Grusch and other witnesses, including Jake Barber, have given these names to particular Senate Intelligence and Senate Armed Services committees in the last few years. The big question in my mind is, have the Senate particularly lost interest in UAPs? Have they been bought off by the defence and intelligence establishment because they've gone very, very quiet? I know there is frustration in the Senate Intelligence Committee, particularly, that the members of that committee are going soft on investigating the UAP issue. They have the evidence, and I smell some kind of internal control. I think, sadly, the defence and intelligence lobby is winning the day in the Senate. And thank you to the members of the UAP caucus in the House who are still pushing with this issue. They are, I'm sorry to say, relatively junior members of the Congress, but they still have power, and full marks to Eric Burlison on the Oversight Committee and indeed on the Dogue Committee, who are still pushing. People like him are still pushing for transparency. And frankly, they will be the people who are remembered in history. I suspect the people on the Senate who are essentially, I think, conspiring to sit on this issue and hope that we all forget about it are the people whose names will live in infamy.
Phil has emailed us. He asked, what is your top theory as to why disclosure of NHI has not occurred? There's this notion that people can't handle the truth. What could be so monumental?
Disclosure of NHI actually has occurred in many ways. If you think about it, think about where we've advanced since 2017. The government of the United States has officially admitted that there is a phenomenon of unidentified anomalous phenomena, intelligently controlled objects moving in ways that appear to be operating under intelligent control, that are doing things using the 5 observables as a test that seem to be beyond human technology. Now, that's about as close as you're going to get to any kind of official disclosure at this time of NHI. And it's funny, I just want to say this. I think sometimes we all tend to treat the military, the defence and intelligence establishment, as one kind of amorphous blob of a bunch of stiffs in suits who are all basically saying, no, we're not going to release this evidence. We're never going to tell the truth about what's really going on with NHI. I'm really struck how in the last few months, particularly since Jake Barber's come forward, there's been a real change inside sources of mine from the defence and intelligence establishment. There are people who are saying to me, because I've asked this question repeatedly, is there any good reason why we can't know at least that there is an NHI presence engaging with this planet? And a few people have reached out to me privately, confidentially, and said, there is no good reason, Ross, keep on pushing. And more importantly, a lot of them are extremely sympathetically disposed towards the Skywatcher operation. A lot of people are saying that what's happening in government is there is a paralysis. and particularly in the US Air Force, talking about stiffs in suits. There are good people in the US Air Force, but there are people in command roles who think that you, the public, will freak out if you learn that the United States Air Force is not able to guarantee air dominance over the United States. And these guys who live their lives swearing an oath to protect the United States simply don't want to admit that there is essentially a technology of some kind that is penetrating US airspace, hovering with impunity over US Air Force bases and civilian areas across the United States, and they can't do a thing about it. They've repeatedly failed using high-tech microwave pulse weapons to bring these objects down. And that's what I'm told is very much the substance of what was revealed in a select Armed Services Committee, a Senate Armed Services Committee hearing that took place earlier this week, that essentially the members have been pushing for answers from the Pentagon, especially since there were admissions made that the Pentagon is still mystified by whatever these UAPs are. People should go back and have a look at the significance of what was revealed on CBS 60 Minutes the other week, where General Van Herk and General Mike Kelly, two retired Air Force generals, along with Senator Roger Wicker, basically all admitted they have no bloody idea what these objects are. So the public's being lied to. And I used to think it was because of some sinister conspiracy. I don't anymore. I just think it's people in the US Air Force in particular and the CIA who can't bring themselves to admit that despite the billions, in fact trillions of dollars we spend on national defense, they are not able to protect the continental United States, CONUS, from incursions by unknown craft. That's the real issue that is hindering disclosure. And frankly, the increasing view from a lot of people on the inside that I'm hearing, including people in the legacy program, is there is no good reason for you, the public, not to know about this. And more importantly, they're placing their hopes that an organization like Skywatcher might prove what the government is so desperately unwilling to admit.
A viewer sent us an email asking about your latest trip to Egypt. I know you did a couple of episodes on the ancient mysteries there. This person is asking, just wondering, what do you think of these strange structures over 2 kilometers beneath the Great Pyramid?
Okay, so a lot of people are asking me about this. This is claims being made by, I think, two Italian scientists relating to not the Great Pyramid of Giza, but the Khafra Pyramid, which is one of the other two pyramids. And the claims are that using synthetic aperture radar, SAR, which is an aerial-based radar system where you scan the ground with radar, they've somehow been able to penetrate the ground 2 kilometers deep to show what appear to be coils of some kind running 2 kilometers underground under the Khafra Pyramid. Now, look, it's a great story, and there are these sensational images that have been generated as a result of that alleged SAR, synthetic aperture radar imaging. We know quite a lot about SAR in Australia, and I've spoken to mining people in Australia this week who use SAR for the purposes of finding mineral deposits in remote parts of the Australian outback. And I'm not saying it's not true, because apparently the scientists who are proponents of this idea say that they've been able to develop a system that can use the SAR in ways that have never been used before. But what I can tell you is there is a high degree of skepticism from the SAR experts, two of whom I've spoken to here in Australia, who are probably leading world experts on synthetic aperture radar. They frankly scoffed at the idea that any system could go down as far as 2 kilometers underground. And more importantly, one of them knew about the fact that there have been aquifers found underneath the pyramids, underneath the Gaza Plateau, and they said that any water would hinder or obstruct any such visualizing of what's underneath. So they're very, very skeptical. I balance that with the fact that I've spoken to people who are experts in remote viewing, a highly controversial and much long discredited attempted telepathic or psychic technique that involves the ability to somehow use the human mind to see into areas remotely. And those remote viewers have told me that there are things underneath the Giza Plateau. So, look, frankly, the only way is to investigate this physically on the ground. And guess who controls access to the underground parts of the pyramids? Zahi Hawass, one of the principals of the Egyptian Antiquities Department, who is not a person known to believe the synthetic aperture radar claims and who has been very quick to dismiss them out of hand. I think in the interests of openness and transparency, why couldn't Dr. Hawass just allow an independent study to come in and attempt to verify on the ground the claims that are being made by these scientists? The other thing I've got a problem with this claimed scientific research is they appear to have published their press release first before putting their article and their actual data up to objective peer review. It would have been better, I think, for them to demonstrate the efficacy of their SAR system on an area where we know there is something underground, like a cave system or perhaps some kind of underground facility, and then see how much we can actually see. Because if SAR was actually this good, don't you think a lot of us would have used it to look for the deep underground military bunkers that I do know exist in certain parts of the continental USA and which I am very actively investigating? And I wish those technologies did have those abilities. And if those Italian scientists do have a capacity to go 2 kilometers underground, count me in. I know where I want to go. I can give you exact latitudes and longitudes.
All right. The next question, Ross, is actually for me. A viewer on YouTube has asked, Aleks, they said they love this Q&A format, wondering what your stance is on UAP, NHI, and if you're now a believer due to the amount of evidence being gathered by NewsNation, or if maybe I had any type of personal experience, or if I'm skeptical. I will say I am a believer. I've always been a believer. I'm very curious, and that's probably why I became a journalist. I have been blown away, though, by NewsNation's work gathering all this information, connecting with whistleblowers, David Grusch. I think that was a huge story that we did and obviously led to a lot of work on Capitol Hill. And so I am very grateful for NewsNation and being able to be a part of this network. Ross, I do have to tell you that this is going to be our last Q&A because I am moving on to another opportunity.
Oh,
But
no.
I know, very sad, but some positive news. We do already have somebody who is willing to help you with these Q&As, and you know her pretty well. I'm going to add her in right now. Meagan, one of your producers, is going
Meagan,
to take
good
over.
to see. Great, Meagan. Lovely to have you on
Ross, great
board.
to see you
What
again. I felt
Aleks
like
is
we
not
didn't see
revealing
enough
is
of
that
each
the
other.
men in black have decided to take her away because she's
Yes.
acknowledged that she's a believer. It's not fair. So, Meagan, let's get it on the
Yep.
record now.
Yes.
Are you a UAP skeptic or a believer?
Well, Ross, as you and I know, there's only one thing we disagree about, and it is not UAPs and UFOs.
In fact, Meagan, can I tell people?
Of course. Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, they're going to get to know me, I hope.
Meagan believes Meagan is something of a skeptic on the moon landing, and I was appalled, absolutely appalled about that because I've interviewed people who landed on the moon, and I absolutely believe them. I do not buy into the wacky conspiracy theories that the Apollo moon missions did not happen. And of course, speaking as somebody who talks about UFOs with certitude, I must say I'm in no position to be able to condemn you for listening to a conspiracy theory. Aleks, it's been a real pleasure to work with you on Q&A, and I wish you the very, very best of luck on whatever program you're moving to. And may your belief in the UAP subject soon turn into categorical certitude and knowledge.
Thank you so much, and I really appreciate this opportunity. And for all the viewers, please keep asking questions in the comments. We will continue to look over those and answer them for you.
And Meagan, looking forward to seeing you next week with some curly questions. Thank you so much.
Let's not forget tomorrow and then Tuesday and Wednesday and the other day.
It never stops because, as we know, too many UAP stories are barely enough. Thanks for watching. Go to joinnn.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And please don't forget to click that red subscribe button to ensure you get more of NewsNation's unbiased and fact-driven news coverage.